Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Certainly. The variable view in Visual Studio Code, VS Code, is a feature that is especially useful when debugging your code. It allows you to inspect the values of variables in your program at runtime, helping you understand the state of your application as it runs. Understanding the variable view in VS Code. The variable view is part of the debugging interface in VS Code. When you run a debugging session, you can see the variable view in the debug sidebar. This view shows you the current values of all variables in the current scope, as well as any watch expressions you've set up. How to access the variable view. 1. Open VS Code, launch Visual Studio Code. 2. Open your project, load the workspace or folder that contains your project. 3. Set up a debug configuration. You need a launch configuration to start debugging. You can create a launch.json file by clicking on the run icon in the activity bar on the side and then clicking on create a launch.json file. 4. Start debugging. Set a breakpoint in your code, click in the gutter next to the line number, and start the debugging session by pressing F5 or selecting Run from the top menu and then start debugging. Example code. Let's create a simple example using Python to illustrate how the variable view works in VS Code. Sample Python code. Debugging the example. 1. Set a breakpoint. Open the above code in VS Code and set a breakpoint on the line fib_sequence equals list, Fibonacci, n. 2. Run the debugger. Start the debugging session by pressing F5. The execution will pause at the breakpoint. 3. Open the debug sidebar, click on the run and debug icon on the left sidebar. 4. View variables. In the debug sidebar, you will see the variable view. Here's what you can expect. Local variables. You should see the variable n with a value of 10, and fib_sequence will not yet have a value since the line that initializes it hasn't been executed. Global variables. If you had any global variables, they would appear here too. Watch expressions. You can add expressions to the watch section to monitor their values as you step through your code. 5. Step through code. Use the step buttons, step over, step into, to execute the code line by line and observe how the values of variables change in real time. After executing the line with fib_sequence, you should see it populated with the Fibonacci numbers. Additional features. Hover. While debugging, you can hover over variables in your code to see their current values without switching to the variable view. Edit and continue. In some languages and configurations, you can modify your code while debugging and continue execution. Conditional breakpoints. You can set conditional breakpoints that only trigger when a certain condition is true, allowing you to inspect the state of your program under specific circumstances. Conclusion. The variable view in VS Code is an essential tool for debugging, making it easier to inspect and understand the state of your application. By following the example above, you should be able to leverage this feature for more effective debugging in your projects. Certainly. The variable view in Visual Studio Code, VS Code, is a powerful feature primarily utilized during debugging sessions. It allows developers to inspect the current state of their program, including the values held in variables, the call stack, and the scope of execution. What is variable view? The variable view in VS Code displays all the variables that are currently in scope at the breakpoint where the debugger has paused. It shows you local variables, variables defined in the current function or block. Global variables, variables that are accessible throughout your code. Watch expressions, custom expressions that you want to monitor. Setting up VS Code for debugging. 1. Install VS Code. Make sure you have VS Code installed on your machine. To install extensions, if you're working with a specific language, ensure you have the relevant extensions installed, example Python, JavaScript, etc. 3. Create a sample project. Create a simple project to work with. Here's an example using Python. Code example. Let's create a simple Python script that you can use to demonstrate the variable view. Steps to use variable view. 1. Open the script, open example.py in VS Code. 2. Set a breakpoint. Click in the gutter to the left of the line number where you want to pause execution. Example, you can add a breakpoint on the line total equals calculate underscore sum, number 1, number 2. 3. Start debugging. Press F5 or go to the top menu and select Run Start Debugging. If prompted, select the environment, Python in this case. 4. Use the variable view. Once the debugger hits the breakpoint, look for the Run and Debug side panel, usually on the left side. Click on the Variables section. Here, you will see local variables, number 1, number 2, and total will be listed with their current values. Global variables, if any, will be displayed as well. Example of variable view output. When you hit the breakpoint, the variable view might show something like this. Watching variables. You can also add expressions to the watch section to monitor specific variables or expressions. 1. In the variable view, find the watch section. 2. Click on plus add expression and type in the variable name or expression you want to monitor, example total. 3. This will allow you to see how total changes as you step through your code. Conclusion. The variable view in VS Code is an essential tool for debugging, helping you understand the flow of your program and the state of your variables. By using breakpoints and inspecting variables, you can identify issues in your code more effectively. Additional tips. Step over/into, use F10, step over, and F11, step into, to navigate through your code line by line. Use console. You can also evaluate expressions in the debug console for quick checks. Debugging configurations. You can set up configurations in launch.json to customize your debugging experience. Feel free to ask if you have any further questions or if you need assistance with a specific language.